Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Beers.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
Usually get up in the morning.
Welcome to this episode of Wayward Writers. We are excited to have Debra Halverson with us, an amazing author who we all admire. Nicki, tell us what we're going to be talking about.
So Deborah is going to be chatting with us about what happened from the first draft to the final say, what writers need to know, but we don't always ask. So we're going to ask those things today of Deborah. Are you ready, Deborah?
Yes.
Stephanie, can you
Awesome.
introduce Deborah to us, please?
Would be happy to. Debra Halverson is an editor at Harcourt Children's Books for 10 years until she climbed over the desk and tried out the author's chair on the other side. Now she is the award-winning author of Writing Young Adult Fiction for Dummies, Writing New Adult Fiction, the teen novels Honk If You Hate Me and Big Mouth, the picture book Letters to Santa, and 3 books in Remix series for struggling readers. Armed with a master's in American literature and a fascination with pop culture, she sculpts stories from extreme events and places, tattoo parlors, fast food joints, and perhaps most extreme of all, high schools. Welcome, Deborah. We're just so excited to talk to you and quiz you about all the things that we should be asking. So, we're talking about trying to fix what's not working in some of our books and finding out what could be working better. Can you talk about the hidden layers of revision that you go through that get overlooked?
Yeah. When we talk about revising, there are certain things we know to look for. We know, authors know. So I am an author, and as you said, I was editing children's books for 10 years with Harcourt Children's Books, and I have been doing that freelance since. And I understand that we are all looking at the bigger storytelling elements like pacing and character, and we try to think, what can I do to make my protagonist the best and most interesting protagonist I can? And one of the things I've found is that often an author will not utilize what they've already put on the page to its full extent. So they'll ask me what's missing, and I say, what you have here just isn't enhanced enough. How can we enhance it and make it do more for you? An example might be, I was writing my novel, Big Mouth. I knew that I wanted the character to meet someone who provoked an epiphany in this character. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get my character Shermie to this point where he could bump into this person who said just the right thing at the right time. And I couldn't make it happen. I remember spinning on an exercise bike for 2 weeks. I can't figure out how to make this happen. And then I realized, why was I bringing in someone entirely new to do this when I had a character who could already do that? It was his best friend. I just had not thought about utilizing his best friend in that way. And this happened, and ultimately when I did, their relationship was much richer. And I did this recently with an author who had a similar problem. They were trying to make a character work who was just there and not doing much, but they said the right things at exactly the right time. And that was their role. And so I asked them to look at the other characters and see how they could all take on a piece of that role and make it happen. And so sometimes we have the tools we have in the cast that we already have, we're just not using them to the fullest. So that's one thing that writers might not think about at first, but to examine the cast you have and see to make sure that they're doing all the supportive work they really should be doing for that character.
Like that, and actually really examining whether you need every character that you have in there too. That's really important.
Yeah, some people will try and address that by justifying that other character being there. So they're working on this subplot for this character on the side, and they have to move away from their main protagonist to make it work. And I'll say, why do you even need that person? They're doing X, have somebody else do X. And it's almost a light bulb moment. They're like, oh yeah. But we get so set in what we've already put on the page that sometimes we might not be open to taking a job from one character and giving it to another.
Boy, it's good to have editors with eyes to look at these things, that's for sure.
As you all know, when it's your own work, you're very set in the vision and you see it a certain way. And that's where someone comes in and asks a question: why does this character really have to be there? What are they doing? What are they doing? And you say, oh, they're only actually doing this one thing. So
That's great. I think I see this a lot in my query inbox that authors often have these really polished pages with like their line edits. Oh, the commas are all in the right place, the periods are all in the right place. But I think often they have these big blind spots in other places that really should have been revised before they even did the line edits. So, how can we as writers get into a more transformative level of revisions, like you're saying? Like, how can we maybe self analyze before we turn it over to those line edits that we need to be doing?
I think one thing is, a lot of times we can get set in the feeling that we have to revise beginning to end because we don't want to lose the flow. And so often I will just tell someone, just do a pass only where you're focusing on this character's dialogue. And that might not frighten, that's not the right word. It might make some people uncomfortable because they worry that it'll start feeling choppy if they go in, then they do a draft just for this person's, a revision pass just for this person's dialogue, or just for the interaction between two characters, or even I've had people do a pass where they only look at the big change moments for a character, for the protagonist, so that they can see later on. This is for teen fiction. We want a protagonist to have a change, growth from the beginning to the end. They get to a point of maturity, but oftentimes at the end, when they're getting to that point of maturity, they suddenly become incredibly articulate about their feelings. And so we want to identify when that change happens, and then go back and make sure that you're studying just those moments of dialogue, if it's third person, or those moments of big change, to make sure that they still feel youthful and like that character, even as you're trying to make them sound like they've learned their lesson. They shouldn't be able to articulate it so well. And so if you do a pass where you're just examining that, you can really focus on that, and you don't get caught up in those commas. You don't get caught up in and sidetracked. A lot of people will make a
Yeah.
checklist, and that they want to keep consulting as they move page 1 to page 200, because it feels messy. It maybe feels less organized to do it piecemeal, but you can always go back in and do that final polishing pass where you work on smoothing again.
Like I could end up doing 500 passes of my manuscript because I'm focusing on the small things. But
Yeah.
I can see your point, especially when you know it's a certain weakness maybe that you have. And those are the things that you do specific passes for and worry.
I can tell you something that I like to tell writers. I call it the stop looking test. And this is one way you can test that, and it pulls your eye to a particular habit that can actually, when you revise for that, have a profound change across the manuscript. So the stop looking test is what I call it, when those little bits of narrative between lines of dialogue. I'm not coming, Sean said angrily, or looking to the side, or when you write dialogue that you need those little breathers, those little beats in there, and I call them the narrative beats. Writers will often focus on their what everyone's saying, and they'll put in the beats because they have a great sense of when a conversation should have a pause, when people need a breath. But then they filled an entire 200-page manuscript, 300-page manuscript with characters looking and sighing and frowning and laughing. Those are missed opportunities for doing something that can be incredibly enriching in that moment. And I'll give them a list of words, and I'll say, do a literal find and search for this word. And they'll look up the word, they'll type in the word looked and find out that they used it 98 times in their 200-page novel. They type in laughed, grinned, smiled, and find out their characters are laughing, grinning, and smiling 50 times. Now, if we start, or turning to, that's a big one. I turned to, she turned to. It's okay sometimes, but if you're doing that and you add up all those times with the different words that are just generic words that don't reveal anything, that just give us that breath, then you've missed all those opportunities to do something more meaningful, to enrich a character, to show their personality. Maybe that would be when they stab the doorbell repeatedly really hard, or when the pause has them, I'm not going, and they turn around and they wash the dish 1,000 times over and over again, rather than deal with the person who's behind them and say why they're not going to do it. That can be the chance to do something really interesting. So how can you break yourself out of maybe feeling stuck with revision and knowing what to do and getting to a new level of writing? You can see if you've missed those opportunities, because once you start addressing them, that can be a time to talk about the setting or put in some internal thoughts or what have you. Suddenly your characters are much richer because they know the mood then, and you relax the dialogue. The dialogue didn't have to do so much. And so that's another way where if you find a tool like that, that can pop you down and it can be a real transformative level of revision, because you're now going in and you're fixing just those little beats. You're looking for just those times you said looking and smiling, and you're putting something more flavorful in action that's more interesting and revealing of the mood and the setting. And suddenly your setting is richer across the whole novel. Suddenly the emotion is richer over the whole novel. Imagine a writer, you've written a character who says, I don't want to. John says, his eyes widening. Eyes are another big one. It's using
Yes. Oh my
eyes.
goodness, Deborah, you
Eye.
caught me.
You find out what your bugaboos are, and once you do this one time, you can do it on every novel going forward.
Yep.
Eyes. And generally, if you got a lot of eyes, you probably got a lot of face. You got a lot of hair because they're pushing the hair out of their face, but you're trying to describe what's happening on their face. And I don't want to, John said, his eyes widening. You have to, Sally replied, scowling. What if we revise that to be, no way, that's scary, John said. Grow up. You'll never win if you quit. You'll never win anything if you keep giving up, Sally said. So I took the pressure. We made the dialogue there do something more interesting, and then you don't have the scowling in the eyes, and you could do something more interesting in that beat about the weather so that you're building the setting. I find that gets a lot of people to a more transformative level of revising.
I love it. Thank you. It's
Yeah, that's
amazing.
great. Because a lot of times we're writing in chunks of time, and it could be days, weeks, months that go by. So you think, oh, I haven't used that word in 30 days. But then when someone goes down to sit and read it, they're like, oh my goodness, is this an ad for a contact lens commercial? I know everyone's eye color or whatever your word is. We all have them. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, and in life, we're used to reading people's faces to find out what they're thinking, and
sure.
we want to put that on the page so it's normal. And you know what? If you put that in your first, second, third drafts, knock yourself out. You're not worried about that there. But when you're revising
Sure.
later and you're trying to figure out how to lift it to the next level, it's a fun, easy trick that just requires the find and replace feature on your computer.
I need the list, though. That you have a great list there of all those
Yes.
things to look for. That's wonderful.
So you just discussed some of the words that we often use. What are other common default settings that even experienced authors tend to fall into, whether it's pacing, character arcs, POV, that we should also keep an eye out for when we're revising?
That will definitely help you with, in terms of a default setting, we default to putting in the beats without necessarily thinking of what's there, and then we don't necessarily go back and check them out. So that will address one default setting. I would say that probably the show don't tell adage has been drilled in us. It has been heard resoundingly. Writers get it, and so they spend a lot of time trying to show and not tell. And sometimes I have to tell people it's okay to tell. It's okay. It really is. You just don't want to do it all the time. So that's another default setting. It's we can try so hard to avoid a pitfall that we fall into another one. And I like to remind people that it's okay to do all of these things that are bad, most of these things that are bad once or twice. And that just gives you a lot of variety in how you're telling your story. Sometimes people say, like in my example, I said, no way, that's so scary. He just told us he was scared. That was okay, because someone would say it at that time. And it's okay that he doesn't just say no way and then we try and bury it in the text that he hunched down and his head got scrunched down because he was scared. It's okay sometimes to tell. So watch out for that with the default settings. Do you have any particular default settings that you fall into when you're writing?
Always.
Sure. How long
Yeah.
do you have? I mean,
That's why I need your list. I do
I
a
like
fine
to
replay.
default to dialogue. I really like to write dialogue, and I will often have to go back and flesh things out beyond the dialogue there. And just being aware that I do that because it's so dynamic and energetic, and I find my characters come alive that way. And when I'm just thinking about the scenes in my head, everybody's talking all the time. And it's wonderful, but it can also be too much. So
mhm.
that's where I have to remind myself to go back in and add the more reflective moments, add the world building moments that aren't just related to a conversation between two people.
That's a good one. How about
Yeah.
you, Stephanie and Heather? What do you fall into?
I do the same thing. I would have talking heads all day long and nobody'd know where anyone was or what they looked like, but we'd have great conversations.
Well,
Okay.
that's a good point. A lot of times, and especially with children's books and the younger, for middle grade especially, they want a lot of dialogue and action. The market wants that, editors want that, agents want that. And you kind of have to remind people that you need to build the world too. And they might have it set in a school where they assume you already know it. And so they can get away with not talking about it so much. And that's why, again, we come back to those little narrative beats. That's a great place to sprinkle in little setting and world details without stopping for a full paragraph. And then you get that balance and your world building takes off. And you can have more of that going on.
And don't you think it's important to, even in a contemporary, like even if it is in a school that kids are familiar with, to put some of that in there so they have a sense of setting, know where it
Yeah,
is?
yeah. In fact, I think that will just make it interesting. We've all gone to school. Most of us have gone to school in a school setting, not everybody, but, and we've seen them plenty in books. And so I would challenge people to think about where you have your scene happening. Does it have to be in the between the
Hmm.
two characters sitting at their desk before the teacher starts talking? You know what? Sometimes students are sent to supply closets or supply rooms down the hall so they can have an encounter at the supply room, and it's more interesting because there's weird stuff around you in the supply room or in the equipment room at the gym. So find a place somewhere. If it's a familiar setting, find a place that's less familiar, that's more interesting, where you can do something unexpected. Unexpected props can show up and unexpected people can show up. And maybe you don't even need to be in school. Does it have to take place in school? We know that kids spend a lot of their times in school, and maybe a specific story talks about it, but can it take place at baseball practice after school or at the scrimmage game so that the characters can only talk and have their fight as they pass each other between innings? Could do something there. Or they're at their after school job and they're constantly interrupted by, oh my God, customers. I've got a life to live. Why are you interrupting my time? You
Yeah,
know?
see, I'm the opposite as you two. I default to the setting being a character, and then I have to remind myself, yes, we need to know where we are and we need to know it from the perspective of that character. It tells us something about the character. But come on, Nikki, get on with the dialogue. So maybe we can all mesh together and say, stop it, stop it.
Oh, I do enjoy settings for Big Mouth, which was my upper middle grade novel. I have so it's a little quirky. It has commercial interruptions and jingles and stuff in the
Oh,
book.
fun.
The school district is sponsored by, because everything's sponsored nowadays. You have Petco Arena or Petco baseball field. You don't have the Padres.
Correct.
So I have them. The district is sponsored by a ketchup company, and so all the schools are red. All the mascots are different flavors of tomato, like the burpee tomato. And so I like that. One of the mysteries is who's tagging the school with mustard. So
That's
I
great.
think it's fun. I think it's fun too. That setting is. I love that you make it a character.
I enjoy it, but I think a little too much. But that's why we have critique partners and agents and editors and things like that. But
You can make your own checklist. You probably have one, but you write down your checklist of your bugaboos.
yeah.
And so when you're done, you go back in, okay, did I do it again? One of my bugaboos, which is absolutely micro level, is I'm an M-aholic.
Mm.
There are not enough M-dash
Yeah.
in the world for
I think
me.
there's a club for us that we can join.
Yeah, you too.
Ellipses is a big one too. Like I've had people just there's ellipses throughout like 10 a page and I feel like I'm constantly stuttering when I'm reading it.
Yeah. So
And another thing
the
you can
revision
do is
happens on that level or the big picture level. So is it any wonder we don't know where to start sometimes?
It
and
is.
there are
Those
also just weak words and things like that you can edit out. Just do searches for weak words or do searches for the word very. Some people just or the word just. People use those words all the time when they really.
I'm a reforming justaholic. I'm
Here's a,
working on it.
here's another one. The characters will they'll think or they'll wonder. She wondered or she thought or she began. That's another one. She began to sing, just sing.
Right.
And she thought about, just this morning, I told the characters, it was a picture book, and the character said, we'll call him Joe. Joe thought, maybe he could do this thing. And then in the next line, he does it. Well, I'm like, just have him do it. skip that line, just pull that line out. So sometimes the thinking, the wondering, and the beginning or starting, those are words I would look for those in your manuscript. And 9 times out of 10, you don't need them. And you're going to end up with a more active sentence.
Yeah.
So you're looking at some really granular edits, which are wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going through this so many times. Do you ever find that authors lose the heart of their story when they're doing all of this revision? And if so, how do you get back to the actual heart of it?
I would say how to get back to the heart of it. One of the things I like to tell people to do from the outset is to write up their hook statement, I call it, or someone might say pitch, that little statement that says what they want to accomplish with the book. And actually post it on your bulletin board next to your computer, on your computer, whatever it is. And that's what you refer back to periodically and frequently. It reminds you it's your beacon in the mist. It's the thing that you set out to write. I'm going to write about this 16-year-old girl who learns how to be a leader or whatever it is, or copes with her mom's death. And as long as that's there to remind you and ground you and bring you back to center, when you start following the tangents, you can stop and say, am I really being true to what it was I wanted to write? that that hook statement would be what you would put in your query letter when you're pitching it, because you've made a statement. It's maybe 35, 40 words about who your character is, what their journey is going to be, what they're going to learn, and something about the concept or the place. It can change. You're allowed to change it, but it's the thing that grounds you and brings you back. I like to remind people as we get into all these mechanical things about words or pacing or any of that, is to remember to humanize your character. And so when you do that, you reconnect with them when you're thinking about if you've humanized them. I've been working with someone who's been working on a middle grade novel. It's a historical fiction about a character who is a famous leader. And they wanted to show from childhood onward how they went through the steps of going from being a shy child to being that leader. And he's so caught up in the research and making sure all the characters are there, the historical characters are there, that all the transformational events happen and that each event shows the change. And after that, the character is less shy and more people are following him. He ticked all those things, but the character themselves wasn't humanized. It wasn't interesting. All the markers were there. The whole book was there. Everything was in place. And so we went back and we were looking at when he was a child. He had a blacksmith friend and he would like to watch that person for hours and hours. And so what about it? He was captivated by the pinging and by the sparks and how beautiful they were and how passionate this person was in changing this stick of metal into something useful. And so when he focused and he remembered this person likes beauty, they like beautiful things. They started noticing the beautiful things around them. They started humanizing this character. And it tied into who this leader ultimately came to be because they became a useful person. They transformed from something that was useful to the community, useful to the world. And so they stopped and they asked, what are the little things that my character, it happened to be a real person, but you can do it with your character. What are the little things that round them out and shape them and make them who they are? And that can stop and bring you back to the core story you wanted to tell. What about that person makes you feel connected to the book? Yes, I've marched through all the mechanical points and hit the beats I wanted to hit, but why do I connect with this character so much? And so that exercise about what he did in his spare time when he wasn't trying to overcome shyness helped bring the writer back to why he wanted to write about this person and fleshed out the character. And he's now tearing through the revision, just tearing through it once he figured that out. And I get emails saying, oh my gosh, guess what I did? And that helped him connect to the core of it.
That's exciting.
Great.
Yeah.
I love it when people get that vision and they see how it's just going to level up their manuscript. This idea of emotional distance during revisions and how close or objective an author should be when they're reworking a draft, or do you think that they should try and pull back and be less objective, or do you think that hurts them in the end?
It's not black or white. And I can tell you, I just told you about that experience, how going in micro into the character just popped open the revision. and made the whole thing flesh out. The opposite, I had the opposite experience with someone who is a best-selling author, and they've changed. They're going for a different audience in a different category. And she had her confidence shaken by feedback that she got. And she thought, maybe I can't do this other thing. And it shook her for a few days, and she realized, I know how to tell a story. She finally had to come back and say, I know how to tell a story. Yes, it's a different format, but I understand how to tell a story. I understand what my process is for making it happen. And she came back and she relied on her process as a writer. What is it, the things I like to do? What's my writing routine? And she put all those pieces back in, and she focused on the mechanics of it. I know that I do dialogue really well. And I see now I didn't do a lot of dialogue in here because I was so focused on doing this other stuff to make it appropriate for this new readership. And so she focused more on her dialogue again and the mechanics of that. And so she leaned into the mechanics and her skills and her writing routine to find her confidence again. And that is how she came back. And she ended up writing a revision that just really nailed it. It's nice to have the quick answer. I think probably each project might determine what you would do. But I think always it comes down to, and this is the hardest thing, we can beat ourselves up so much as a writer, but understanding, having confidence in the most core fact that you are a storyteller and you know how to do this. And so when you're shaken about a revision, you don't know what it is, you can stop and think, I've done this before, I can do it again. It's just a little rougher going this time, but in this case, should I lean on my mechanical skills? Or in this case, people are telling me they're not finding the character believable. So I'll focus on fleshing out that character and I'll start asking them questions. I'll take them to dinner in my head and we'll have a talk. I'll go grocery shopping with the person and they'll start putting in the basket all the things they wanted, and I'll find out what interests them that I haven't thought about before. So that's what makes it possible for us to talk so much about writing. There are just so many answers that are different for every project. But I think if you're stuck, you can consider a couple paths. Should I consider the mechanics of it, which we talked about a lot, with the looking and smiling and doing the word search there? Or should I stop and think, have I gotten too into mechanics, and do I need to think about the character's needs as a person if they were sitting right here as a human?
Well, and I
think
think
that's
you had a key statement there, which was oftentimes we need to go outside ourselves and get an advice from a critique partner or from an editor or from someone, a reader who reads widely, or things like that that can help us really focus on what's not working.
I find that myself. Any of you, when you help others with their writing, when it comes to our own writing, we need someone else to come in. We get so close to it, we can't see. And if you're not in a critique group, maybe that's not your thing, but that's something to explore. Maybe you've got that one reader who is that particular reader who is thoughtful and seems to nail things for you. I find the outside objective voice necessary for my writing. I actually go and get a freelance editor to work on my projects because I would fall into the same thing. I do want thoughts. And oftentimes it's not that they have the answer. They just might ask the right question at the right time.
Yes. Yes. And the question is the answer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So you lead us into how, when writers get different feedback from different critique partners or agents or editors, that whole thing, they're shopping it before it's ready to go out. How do you help writers navigate the different opinions? And yeah,
That is very hard because sometimes they'll conflict.
sure.
Sometimes they,
yes. Sometimes they do, and it's so confusing,
yeah.
especially for newer authors, I think. So what do you advise? It's a great question.
A lot of times you'll have feedback from a number of people and you can triangulate. You're like, people are having issues with this character. People are having issue with the pacing. They might be very specific. They might say that I don't think the character's likable, or I don't like them, and that's very specific, but you can stand back and say, okay, I need to work on characterization here. What are the tools that I can get for characterization? So you might not take their specific feedback, but realize there's an issue here and look at it that way. When they're conflicting, ultimately you have to go with your gut. Sometimes as writers, we just say, I'm going to take, even when you have the best feedback, what you feel is the best feedback, you still might only take 90% of it. You don't have to take all of it. So I like to listen for You're someone, when people are poking at the same issue, even if they're not sharing the same specific feedback, and start there. You can reject feedback though. You can. That feels scary to do that, but not every opinion matches what you want to do. And I guess that also comes back to what I said about what we talked about with coming back to your core reason for writing that story. Oh, that makes me think. So I've had a writer, not just one, but they've come to me and they said, I've revised so often, I've gotten totally away from what I wanted to do. And so we talked about, okay, tell me what it was you wanted to do to begin with. And sometimes that means jumping back several drafts and going from there. Yeah, I've had that happen.
I've had that happen with friends, especially picture book authors. It seems like that I'm critiquing, and it's like they'll take so much and it just morphs into something different. I think it's a little harder to morph an entire novel into something different. But yeah, I've seen that. And I really like what you were saying about where several people are poking at the same thing, because that's what I find is I have 2 or 3 or 4 people poking at the same problem. That's when I really start to pay attention to, oh, it's not working for multiple people.
Yeah. And they might offer specific suggestions because we all want to be happy and say, you could do this instead.
Yeah.
And maybe the instead and the solution isn't what you need to hear. You just need to hear there's an issue with this item.
Yeah. Sometimes, and it is like when you're saying, have somebody ask the right questions more than, because I think we all want to try and solve it for our critique partners. And sometimes it's just a matter of asking the questions.
Yeah, I would love to solve everything for everything. Because
No.
I want people to walk away from me feeling like they have a path forward.
Sure.
And what I will usually do is, here are the issues, here are my concerns, here's an idea or two, or sometimes I'll say, I just don't have the idea. But here's an idea or two and how you could change it. And you know what? This might not be what you settle on, but in reading my idea, it's going to illuminate more of the points that I had, and it's going to break you loose and have you thinking bigger picture. And someone actually sent me an email this morning, and they said, you've shaken up my brain. She's this idea, but what you
That's
did, you shook
great.
up my brain. And so now I'm actually really excited. And so I was like, you just made my day. I deserve some chocolate now, because
You
anytime I
do.
can shake up anyone's brain, I
Yes,
think that's a good thing. Because when you shake
I
up
absolutely.
think it
people's
is
brains,
too.
oh,
I think that's great.
yeah,
So
things fall
Deborah,
out.
I love that you're shaking up brains. That's awesome. But you've been in this business a long time and you've seen lots of trends come and go. Are there craft decisions that come and go or that you think fit better in today's market for authors writing for today?
I have seen a lot of trends come and go. You all know very well that we don't write to trends because they will probably be done by the time we're done. But just in overall market shifts, that's something that we deal with. And especially right now, it feels like there's been a big shift in certainly children's books. That's where I specialize. But I
Mhm.
think we can say that about any other category. There's always going to be change because there's change in the readership and what they demand. I think that, first of all, just always stay open, stay nimble. When change comes, even good change can be stressful. It can cause us to doubt ourselves. And just, if you have the mindset you're always going to be nimble and open to things, then it's going to be an easier process as the change happens, because it always will. And if we get settled and stuck and refuse to change, I don't care if it's writing or anything else, you're going to be unhappy. I think that what you can always remember is that if you're willing to be nimble and try new things and think about maybe your category differently, generally within change, good or bad, is an opportunity for growth. And so if you're reminding yourself that you're probably going to grow and try some new things and find out you're good at this or that, or you can be better at this or that, or this other thing you're doing is really good and you're going to stick with it, that's all good. So just congratulate yourself on being open to the growth that comes with the change and celebrate that and lean into that. It's really hard when you want to do this specific thing and you feel like the market doesn't want it. Sometimes we're just guessing. Heather, you can weigh on this. We believe we know what the market wants to a certain degree because of what they're buying. I often question myself, are they only buying that because that's what we're offering? And then someone will come out with a book that's really different and the market says yes. And so we get to do something different. We do our best to if we want to sell, books, we want a career where we're selling books, we have to be mindful that the market wants things different, right?
Yeah, and I do want to weigh in a little bit because I think that oftentimes we really have to compromise less than we think we do to fit in the market. I think that, for instance, right now in the children's market, there has been a big shift. They want lower page counts. They want the same thematic elements oftentimes, but with a lower maybe reading level or things like that. And I think in the industry right now, in with the readership actually that we are providing books for, they have been changed by COVID. They have been changed by having phones. They have been changed by the media that they consume and TikTok and the social apps that they're on. And so I think that the thing is that we all know that the readership of today is a little bit different, I think, than we've ever encountered before. And so maybe if you're writing a middle grade, you just want to make your chapters a little bit shorter. You want to make your whole entire book a little bit shorter. Is it going to require you to really hone your craft and make all of these things that used to fit in a 50,000 word book be in a 35,000 word book? Yeah, it's going to take some skill. But I think that we can adapt ourselves to the readership that we want to meet. And it does take being aware. Like, I think we need to, maybe you're a 50-year-old writing for a middle grade kid today. You need to be aware of what middle grade kids are like today. They aren't like you when you were in middle grade. That's not who they are. And so even if it's a historical novel, I think sometimes we need to really think about our audience. And if that's why you're writing, like you said, if you're writing to get published, if you are just writing for you and you want to write because this is how it was when you were a kid and you want to reminisce or you want to process some things that happened to you or whatever, that's fine too. And that's definitely viable. But
I would say that even, and so you're learning to write a tighter story. That's a good thing. It's another skill. That's a good thing. But you're not, is that compromising your literary vision? Why does it have to be? Why can't your literary vision be that you want to deliver what all readers ultimately want? They want to be entertained, they want to be enlightened, and they want to feel safe. So you're still doing that, and you're still taking the time to craft a lovely story. You're just learning to do it in a tighter way. If you've,
exactly.
yeah. So, or maybe you've decided to go for a different format and you're going to do a novel in prose. You're going to stretch yourself to learn something new. And that might be a voluntary thing, but other things might be less voluntary. And I just think they're growth opportunities as long as you stay centered on why you're writing and why they want a book. That's not changing whatever generation they're in.
That's true.
I just love, love, love talking about writing. I like talking about revision, and I love talking about with people who do those things and love those things. And so
Mm.
every free minute, that's what I want to talk about.
We could keep you here way too long. So, because I'm thinking about, oh, really short. I need to pull that thing back out.
When I was first trying to get into publishing, Harcourt Children's Books was in San Diego, and so I was able to get into publishing without moving to New York.
Wow.
And this was old school. This was 1995. On my first day, they had said, "Oh my gosh, we have this thing. It's called email. You're gonna love it." So I got into through various ways into the children's books. And on my first day, I walked in, and the managing editor took me around, and there was an art show. And if any of with picture books, there's a day when the art all comes in. The editors will lay it out. At least we did. We laid it out on a table and then cut up the manuscript and laid it out. And so we would walk around. We would invite everyone to come who had worked on the book and anyone in the mailroom who were delivering us the packages for the book all the time. And we would just celebrate that it had come to this form. And the editor would go around and read it and check it all and all of that. But to meet the contracts people who had worked on the contracts for it, to come in and be excited about the book. And so I walked out and I'm like, I have found my people. And as I sit in this
Awesome.
virtual room, I'm like, I am among my people. It's the
That's
best.
great.
That is,
It's good.
I love what you said about you have an author who's a best-selling author, and it's like it's comforting in that no matter how many books you've written or sold or in the same category or not, every project's different. And some of them just take your breath away when you dive into that revision. And how are you going to do this? So, how do you recommend when your authors are overwhelmed and it's okay, I'm going to revise now? Like, how do you recommend they eat that elephant one bite at a time? What are some tips you give to start the process that feels so overwhelming?
I will often tell them literally in the feedback, this is for the next stage, this is for the next stage, work on this first. Ultimately, I find that enthusiasm and excitement drives them through it. And so if you remind someone of the things that they do really well and they can build on that, honestly, that's a lot of the battle there. So if you remind yourself of the things that you do well, you can be ready to cozy up to that elephant with your knife and fork. But if you know, I do this, I've done this before, I can do it again, I know how to tell a story, I know what feels good in a story, I'm going to have a bumpy road with these few things, I'm going to figure out the mechanics, but actually I can do this. I find just that overall mindset does it. One thing I like to do, I like to stand next to my bookshelf with my favorite books and I'll pull off a book by my favorite author. It might be Karen Cushman, it might be Philip Pullman, and I'll just open to a page and I'll read it. I'm like, that's why I'm doing this. I'm not someone who is intimidated by other people doing it. In fact, I find that useful for me because I want to write like that. I want to do it that well. And so I just remind myself why I'm doing it. And when I see someone's final product that I loved, that makes me want to do it. That's a trick that I use for myself.
I like that.
It's fantastic advice because that's your why, and it's a challenge to meet those standards. It's just awesome. This has been so great to talk to you. I really do feel like I've just taken a very high level class. I could do this all day.
Me too.
Thank you so much.
It's and for books for young people, I find that, and you all write books for young people as well and represent books for young people. And so I on who the audience is, and remember they just want to be happy. For me, when it's a picture book, I envision myself reading the every night reading that a parent will do. I would do with I have triplet boys. And so we would sit down and read together with them piled up on my lap when they were little enough to do that. And remembering the reader helps me also feel confidence because I know they just want something that's fun. They're not going to sit there and count the number of M dashes in the word look.
Yeah, exactly.
So true.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Oh, this has been super fun. I wanted to go on for several hours, but we'll stop.
Okay.
You'll have to come back.
Well,
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.